All animals can scream.
There's a weird little subgenre of games that's gotten more popular in recent years called walking simulators, and not always in a complimentary way. Narratively driven games where the entire gameplay, or almost all of it, is just a lot of walking, talking, and other things you wouldn't normally consider as gameplay, at least not in the traditional sense. Games like Life is Strange, or the one where I first heard the term used, Dear Esther. Even if the game lacks any traditional gameplay, there's a style to it that it just wouldn't work as a movie. The argument of, if you don't want to have real gameplay, just make a movie, doesn't hold up. Sometimes because of reliance on player choice, and sometimes because of the way it handles its mechanics, in a context that if it were a movie, it wouldn't have the same impact. The reason I bring this up is because it brings me into one of the oldest games that could be considered a walking simulator, Yume Nikki, Dream Diary. Not to be confused with Yume Nikki, Dream Diary. Yeah, I know it's confusing. A Surreal RPG Maker game developed in 2003 by an independent developer who goes by Kikiyama. Interestingly enough, it actually took some inspiration from the Earthbound Mother series, which becomes much more apparent in some of the later areas. Kinda noticing a trend here with some of my favorite games. But at the same time, I don't think it can really be called a walking simulator in the same way the others I've mentioned can, because even after finishing Yume Nikki twice on my own and doing a full let's play of it, I still don't have a definitive answer for exactly what this game is. It doesn't even have a single line of dialogue, not from its protagonist, Marotsuki, not from any of the strange people or creatures you find, not from any of the items. But at the same time, we learn a lot about Marotsuki purely from context. In fact, that theme occurs a lot throughout this game. From this idea, I think it's fair to call Yume Nikki less of a walking simulator and more of an exploration simulator. Marotsuki is a hikikomori, a Japanese term that essentially refers to a complete shut-in with no job, not in school, not in training, who looks for extreme degrees of isolation. Someone who, for example, might stay in their home for at least 6 months at a time with seemingly no connection to the outside world. Right away, this tells you a surprising amount about who she is. Why is she a shut-in? We don't know. But it immediately tells us that whoever she is, she does seem to have some sort of mental disorder, because otherwise she probably wouldn't be in this sort of state. Technically, this room is where you'll be for the entire game. Just trying to leave Marotsuki's room at all results in her refusing, though it's never really said whether this is Marotsuki not wanting to, or being physically unable. Given that we do in fact know that Marotsuki is a shut-in, I tend to lean towards it being her own mental condition preventing her from leaving, rather than any physical bar or lot. You start the game, you hear something fall, and the second it hits the ground, Marotsuki wakes up. The basic gameplay loop consists of Marotsuki going to sleep and exploring her dreams, most of which are surreal and extremely confusing, sometimes bordering on unnerving. This is a game about exploring dreams until you get tired of it. You go through these odd and confusing dreams, finding different paths and different approaches, and gaining different abilities, which are referred to as effects. Each one gives you a different way of approaching the other worlds. Some of them are purely cosmetic, some of them give you more convenience, and some give you access to even more dreams. From the very first room, you know that these dreams have some tie to reality, as surreal as they are. The very first thing you see in the dream is Marotsuki's own room, nearly identical but with some minor differences, like the phantom in the balcony background. I think it's worth mentioning real quick that there is a non-canon manga adaptation of Yume Nikki, which gives us some view of Marotsuki's personality. However, I don't think this can be taken as canon, as there's really nothing to suggest it is. It's also not that good, but let's not get into that right now. If we assume that these dreams really do have some connection to reality, then a lot of the more unnerving aspects of the game just start to raise more questions. Things like the knife power and the viable option of just murdering the weird people that inhabit these dreams. Or the rooms filled with the number 4, a number which can be read as she, meaning death, and we see it repeated over and over in some of these worlds. In the Pink Ocean, we find a blonde girl named Ponito, who when you turn off her lights will sometimes turn into this thing. Some of the things in Marotsuki's dreams range from kind of creepy implications to full-on eldritch horror. What about my guy Bidred? What does he represent? You okay in there? I don't want to know what this represents. I don't like it. Please. This area is just hell. Like, it's just literally hell. That's its name, it's just hell. And what about this guy? That's a lizardman? That's not to say that these dreams are all creepy or even sad at all. In the end, Yume Nikki isn't a horror game. You explore dreams as much as you explore nightmares. This game isn't about getting stared, it's about exploring. Sometimes you'll find good things, sometimes you'll find things you probably shouldn't have. but in the end you can't really die. At worst, you wake up and go back in for another try. When the game is at its best, you're on edge because you don't know what will come next, and it really is hard to predict. If there's one thing Yume Nikki nails, it's the feeling of a dream. Nothing has to make sense, but it's not indecipherable, just surreal. Like the feeling of thinking about how little sense a dream you had makes in retrospect, even if you can list off the events that happened in it. There's a lot of differences for what exactly all of this is meant to mean. Maratsuki's own recurring theme of changing her appearance throughout the effects leads some people to believe that the reason for her reclusiveness is caused by shame or discomfort with herself, maybe because of something she did, her appearance, gender, or something we'll never really know about. I also hear people say that it's about abuse. It's true that the majority of the characters you meet are all hostile or at the very least menacing. Another I've seen is that Maratsuki just had unrelated issues like schizophrenia. Looking at artwork by people who suffered from schizophrenia, it's easy enough to see the similarities in style. Another theory is that the door really was locked and Maratsuki just wanted to escape. But at the end of the day, all the theorizing in the world won't tell us why the game ends like it does. It's still just all theories, which I think is the most fitting state for a game about dreams. Once you've found all the effects and lined up the fruits of your labor in the hub area, Maratsuki wakes up again. You walk up to your balcony and, without saying a word, Maratsuki commits suicide via jumping off it. It was you falling at the beginning of the game. My own interpretation, though I'm not the first to think of it, is that the game was Maratsuki remembering her dreams right before her fall. You see everything from her dreams walk past and the game ends on sirens in the distance. It's a bleak ending for a game which, for the most part, left its tone entirely up to your interpretation and ideas. Or maybe she didn't. Maybe it was just another dream. The most common interpretation I've seen is that Maratsuki just stopped having new dreams. If reality isn't worth bothering with and dreams are also getting old, then to her it wasn't worth living. Again, it's something the creator never elaborated on, and honestly I'm glad about that. It's not a perfect game and it's not my favorite, but it's also really hard to criticize, because, really, it did everything it was setting out to do. It's this weird little corner of indie games that you have to sneak into and find where the weird stuff is. You'll never really understand it, and that's fine. Yume Nikki is a unique piece of the indie games industry that nobody has ever really tried to emulate. There have been other games with visible inspiration like Mad Father or my personal favorite, Ib, and a boatload of fan games, some of which are actually pretty good. Good story-driven games aren't as rare as they sometimes seem, but it's nearly impossible to find one that can show so much personality without ever saying a word. Take Ponito, for example. You never speak with her, but there's still so much to take from a brief meeting. You find a pleasant, welcoming home with a girl not very much different from yourself. You can switch off the lights and, well, normally nothing changes. Occasionally she transforms into her boa, a black and white monster that drags you off to this odd, slightly off version of the White Desert Dream. You wade through water, unable to escape, until eventually you're forced to either be here forever or use another power to teleport away. Why? Maybe Ponito, nice and similar as she seemed, had a darker side. Maybe Uboa is the darker side, someone Maratsuki met only to be disillusioned with how other people can be. With this interpretation, Ponito seems two-faced, trapping you permanently the moment her attitude changes. Or maybe Ponito is Uboa's victim too, just as much as you are, and you poked your head in a little too far. Maybe Uboa doesn't mean badly at all and it just doesn't realize it's trapping you. If you want to try to explain everything, maybe Uboa is just a representation for whatever trapped Maratsuki in her room, if you believe that branch of theories. Maybe it's trying to symbolize the darker aspects of Ponito and by extension Maratsuki that you won't really notice unless you're looking. Stuff like, for example, the knife power again. My point is that there's no limit to the ways to interpret this game. Maybe there never was meant to be an explanation for everything in the first place. Sometimes games like to try to say, it's up to your interpretation, to avoid giving their own, and it seems lazy, but that's not how it is in this. Here, that's part of what gives Yume Nikki its charm, the feeling of traversing this lonely, isolated dream world, and trying to make any semblance of an understanding about what it all means, even if, at the end of it all, Maratsuki still ends up the same way. You could even argue that the fact that we don't understand why Maratsuki really jumped is the exact thing we're supposed to feel. That is the point. Plenty of people commit suicide and will never understand why they did it or what they went through. Maybe Maratsuki is no different. Because unlike the other games it spawned off of, Yume Nikki only has one way to end, and that's Maratsuki's suicide. In theory, you don't ever have to do this. It's completely up to you when Maratsuki stops exploring her dreams, but eventually you'll always want to finish the game. You can only explore the same dreams for so long. That's why Maratsuki did it. That's why you end up doing it. Or at least, that was my interpretation of it. If you're interested in more Yume Nikki content or just RPG Maker games in general, Here you'll find a link to my own Let's Play of Yume Nikki, together with Matt and Matthew from Team Death Lobster. I'm also in the process of doing a Let's Play of Yume Nikki's 3D reboot and spiritual successor, Yume Nikki Dream Diary. Yeah, I know it's a confusing naming sequence, just slap on the translation, hope it works. Dream Diary, Dream Diary. I also did a Let's Play with Matt of another game like Yume Nikki that I mentioned prior, Ib. Honestly, it's one of my favorite games in this style, so maybe I'll do a video on that also. The final episode of that Let's Play might or might not be up when this is uploaded, but if it's not, I guess I'll just put a link in later. Thank you for watching.